Now is Ralph Reed. He's the author of Awakening, subtitled. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say how America can turn from economic and moral destruction to greatness.
Back to greatness.
I'm sorry, they left out a back to.
Meaning we were once great, and we've been sliding.
We want to, and that is, man, with the World Vision story that's out there, that's even more prevalent.
Family.
And what's happening in the Supreme Court. Sorry, Tim.
Yes, the Worthy Books is the publisher of this. Awakening is the title of it. Ralph Reed joins us. Ralph, good morning to you, or good afternoon if you're in Georgia, aren't you?
I am indeed. Thanks, Tim. It's great to be with you. I appreciate your ministry. Appreciate all you guys do. Love the radio show.
Absolutely. How long have you been in this fight? 30 years? 25 years?
Yeah, 30 years, 31 years. I'm really a Reagan baby, and I have a chapter in Awakening about Reagan. You know, I thought I knew Reagan until I started doing the research for this book, and I knew a little bit. I've read just about every book that has ever been published on Reagan, but I never really understood what a profound story about the hand of God his life really was. And, you know, Kim, the reason why I wrote Awakening is, you know, I know you guys cover it every day on the radio. You know, I looked at the various data points of America's decline, $17 trillion national debt, anemic economic growth. America's economy today looks a lot more like the Eurozone than it does the economy of the Reagan or even the Clinton or Bush years. $65 trillion in unfunded entitlement obligations. 40% of all the children born in America today will be born out of wedlock. About half of all marriages ending in divorce within 6 or 7 years. And you begin to ask yourself, are we done? You know, is America just going into irreversible decline like a Rome or the British Empire?
Right.
And the answer in the book is, yes, it is, but God is on the throne, and there have been spiritual and moral awakenings before that have changed the trajectory and the path of our nation. It's happened in the past. It can happen again.
Talking to Ralph Reed. Ralph, let's talk politics for just a moment. I know your book isn't all about politics. You mentioned many different issues there. But I do want to talk about politics for just a moment, because that's when you get into a lot of divisiveness among the brethren out there. Okay, and I've been around long enough now. I'm 51, and you have too. Obviously, you've been involved in a lot of campaigns. To try to explain to our brothers and sisters that at least my view on politics and government, and that is, which I hope is logical, and that is a lot of people want all or nothing with candidates and with a voting record and things, and I think that's wonderful if we could find people who agreed with us. Right. You know, 100% on issues, and we could find those people to run for office every time, House, Senate, state legislature, school board, or whatever. But politics is not like the church. The church, you can expect somebody to be in line with your doctrine, or they can go to another church, or you can go to another church. You expect your elders, your deacons, your pastors to be doctrinally sound across the board. That's a reasonable expectation. But when you get into the world of politics, you're talking about having to mix up with people who may not even be Christian. So you're trying to work within a system. In your case, Ralph, for the most part in the Republican Party, you have to pick a party. The party is a secular entity. It's not the Baptist, Methodist, or Presbyterian church. Right. And then you have to work within that party to get things accomplished, and you have to build consensus. You have to build unity, not unity, but you have to have the numbers to get things done. You oftentimes have to compromise on something to get something else that you want. So it's not a pure business, but a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters want to see it that way, and if it's not that way, they don't want to have anything to do with it. And it's just it's going to take a little bit more of a sophisticated look at how you get things accomplished politically than what a lot of our folks think it is can be accomplished, or else it's compromising. You want to? I know I just gave a 5 minute. I do need some oxygen.
Was there a question?
I'm going to get some coffee and oxygen while you answer, Ralph. And
Yeah, right,
Go
right.
ahead.
And just,
Go ahead.
now
Talk.
you just-
Did my question make sense?
No, I think
No, it didn't.
really,
It didn't make any sense. Okay, I'll repeat
Tim,
it. Just stay with me for
that was
5.
that was such a brilliant exposition of the topic. I
Okay.
really honestly don't have a
Like to
a lot
say,
to-
like to
a lot
add.
to add other than this. My testimony is very different than most believers who are involved in politics. I was in politics. I was a foot soldier of the Reagan Revolution. I was the national executive director of the College Republicans, and I was national co-chair of the youth effort for Ronald Reagan when I made my decision for Christ. And by then I had already worked on Capitol Hill, and I'd already worked on a number of campaigns. So everything that you just explained,
Yeah.
I knew experientially and I knew intuitively. It had been the story of my young life. And I think the challenge with a lot of believers is they think that a political party is a church whose job it is to promulgate and enforce a doctrine and check everybody's papers at the door.
Right.
And, in a lot of evangelical churches, Tim, we have a thing that's known as fencing the table or guarding the communion table.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be done in an offensive way, but you basically say, look, if you're not really right with God, you're not to come and to take the elements of the Holy Communion, okay? And there's different doctrines in different churches. Here's the funny thing about politics. Take everything that I just described and invert it, and that's politics. Politics works in the opposite way. It leaves the people who are already with you, and it wanders around and looks for people who might not agree with you on everything, but who agree with you on most things. And you say, come on in. So you're building bridges to people who might agree with you on 6 out of 10 issues or 7 out of 10 issues. Ronald Reagan put it this way. He said an 80% friend is not a 20% enemy. And in politics, if you want to get to 50% plus 1, Tim, the math is real simple. Now, you're going to get different numbers from different people. Gallup will have a different number than Barna. Barna will have a different number than Pew. But a good rough number of the percentage of the American population and electorate that would be a self-identified, born-again evangelical, Bible-believing, church-attending Christian is going to be somewhere between 25 and 30% of the electorate. Now, last time I checked, you need 50% plus 1 to win.
Right.
Therefore, if the faith community wants to get to 50% plus 1, you are, by definition, going to be in a coalition with libertarians, with Chamber of Commerce types, with hunters and sportsmen who may not agree with you on some of these other issues. But if you want to ever get your agenda to move, you got to get to 50% plus 1 in a democracy.
We're talking with Ralph Reed in his book, Awakening, How America Can Turn from Economic and Moral Destruction Back to Greatness. And this is the program Today's Issues. Ralph, as you're continuing to explain that, some people, how does that, am I supposed to compromise my ideals or my morals to get to that end?
I don't think you have to compromise your morals or your principles. And in Awakening, I talk about the fact that throughout history, when there have been social reform movements, whether it was the anti-slavery movement or the suffragist movement to give women the right to vote, or more recently the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, and now in our own time, the movement for stronger families, the sanctity of life and marriage and religious freedom. I view all of these as social reform movements. There's 2 things that are common to these movements, and I write about every one of them in Awakening. Number 1, they are fired by a moral zeal that is informed by a clarity about right and wrong and evil and good. And, there was no question that if you came to Christ during the Second Great Awakening under the ministry of Charles Grandison Finney, you knew that slavery was wrong and you knew it was evil, okay? But here was the other thing about every one of those social reform movements. Every one of them, without exception, achieved the goals and the stated objectives of its movement incrementally. If you look, for example, at the temperance movement didn't ban all alcohol by the drink in one fell swoop. They moved state by state, and they passed state anti-saloon laws. And that went on for 70 years. If you look at the civil rights movement, they didn't even have either party have a civil rights plank until 1948 at the Philadelphia Convention, where Harry S. Truman was nominated, and it wasn't until 1964 that they had the Civil Rights Act. So those evangelicals and faithful Catholics and believers who feel run down and despondent because we've now been at this pro-life movement for over 40 years and are wondering, are we really making any progress? We are making progress.
Mm-hmm.
We've got fetal pain bills. We've got clinic regulation bills. We've got the partial birth abortion ban. We've got parental notification and consent. And do you know what's happened in the intervening 40 years? The abortion rate per 1,000 women in this country has been cut in half. And
Amen.
These kinds of things take a long time. That's the message. Don't compromise your morals. Don't compromise your belief, but be prepared to be in this struggle for 50, 60, 70 years.
I every once in a while I hear somebody who says they're a Christian and they're a smart aleck about this, and they'll say, we've been fighting abortion since 1973. What do we have to show for it? This is a big waste of time. We need to be preaching the gospel. Mm-hmm. I hear that kind of stuff, and I just go, wait a minute. Hold on, mister. First of all, it's not a waste of time to defend the lives of innocent unborn children, even if you're unsuccessful, okay? Because God cares about human life. So that's number one. Number two is, as Ralph just cited, the pro-life community, made up largely of Christians, because they believe what God's word says about human life, defending human life, have made a lot of progress, have saved a lot of unborn babies' lives, and helped mothers who've been who are unwed mothers. So a lot of ministry's been done, a lot of good has been done over the last since 1973, despite the fact that we don't have an overturning of Roe versus Wade. So let's not forget, as Ralph just cited, all the good numbers that have that we've seen because of the activism inside the Christian community on the pro-life issue. Your book is called Awakening, Ralph. You know that already, of course.
But he wrote it.
Yeah, he wrote it. He knows the title of it. But it's subtitled How America Can Turn from Economic and Moral Destruction Back to Greatness. You have a website for the book?
They can go to awakeningbook.net. They can go to, if they want to get the book, go to Amazon, go to christianbook.com. Go to Barnes & Noble. They're all out there. And if they want to find out more about how to be an effective citizen, which is the chapter that I closed the book with, there's lots of great organizations to go to, not just the one that I founded, but Faith and Freedom Coalition is at ffcoalition.com. And what I call for, Tim, is exactly what you just said. It's not an either-or. We need to be sharing the gospel. We need to be ministering to the poor. We need to have ministries that are helping the hurting. But part of our witness as believers here on earth is to be effective and engaged citizens.
Yeah, it's awakeningbook.net. And
awakeningbook.net.
Yeah. And as always, we encourage you to patronize your local Christian bookstore.
Yes, indeed.
As well, folks. Let me ask you about that, Ralph, not the bookstore.